I believe we're going to be starting with Mayor Marlin and Chief Seraphin first.
Sure. Well, I'd like to welcome you all here. I'm very thankful that you've joined us today. And this is the first of three listening sessions over the course of today and tomorrow that we'll be holding. And we're particularly interested in hearing the public's comments and suggestions for the police use of force policy. And this, of course, is one of the many, many policies that guide our practices here at the City of Urbana, and in particular, police response in certain situations. You may not know, but there are probably, well, there are about, last year, there were about 27,000 calls for service to the police department, ranging from everything to, you know, might be a dog running loose in the neighborhood to can you check on my uncle, we haven't heard from him in a few days, to very serious situations like shots fired or violence in the neighborhood. But each and every time our first responders are there. And out of those 27,000 calls for service, the use of force was involved in 110 times. So that's about 0.4% of the total number of calls for service last year. And while that's a very, very tiny percentage, it has a big impact both on members of the public, or can have a big impact on both members of the public and on the police officers. And that's why we're focusing on this topic today. And then the end goal is to better serve the public. So with that, I'll turn this over to Chief Seraphin. And again, thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. And yes, I would like to thank you for attending. There are other things that someone could be doing this afternoon, but you chose to be here and you chose to participate. So I thank you for that. As the mayor said, in 2019, over 27,000 citizens contacts. I had to go back, Mayor, and double check a couple of the facts, but it was 112 uses of force, which still is 0.4%. And that is a small number. And while these events, though, are low frequency, they are very high stakes for the citizens and for the officers. They have a big, big impact. For over a decade, I was part of our investigations division and was involved in investigating serious uses of force throughout the county. And I can assure you, again, both sides of this equation, the officers and the citizens and their families and the witnesses, these events have a very big and sometimes very traumatic impact. So I hope today is beneficial as we move down this process of reworking the policy. And again, I thank you for participating. Lamont?
Thank you so much, Chief Seraphin and Mayor Marlin both. And to piggyback on what they said, first of all, my name is Lamont Peppers. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Urbana. And I want to thank everyone who's here participating. I want to thank everyone who will at some point participate either this afternoon, which is the youth focused session only. We also have a session this evening as well as tomorrow, which will incorporate the greater area at large. But before we get started, I would like to just kind of share some housekeeping rules and guidelines moving forward to best process through this. Like I stated before, my name is Lamont Peppers. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Urbana. I will be serving as today's moderator and facilitator. We have heard from our mayor, Mayor Diane Marlin, as well as our very own Chief, Bryant Seraphin. So now on to a few housekeeping rules. We here at the City of Urbana openly acknowledge that there have been some key unfortunate events which have brought us here today. We also recognize the sensitivity to some people of these past events across the emotional spectrum. Having said that, this venue is to create an open dialogue to receive your thoughts and ideas regarding the most equitable process and practices when it comes to the police department's use of force policy. In clarifying what this particular venue is, let us be mindful and clear of what it is not. This is not an arena for personal attacks against named individuals, a time to filibuster and or personally monopolize the conversation or time constraints, and maybe most importantly, that this is not a time to throw out verbal decorum and acceptable language. Hence, The use of profanity, racially charged words or phrases, language that is offensive in nature as it relates to race, gender, sexual orientation, appropriate pronoun usage, and or slanderous attacks on municipal staff within the city of Urbana, Illinois will not be tolerated. We are not asking, nor do we come with the expectation that this topic of conversation will not be emotionally charged. However, violations of the aforementioned guidelines will result in muted microphones and interjected conversation by myself, at which time those individuals will not be permitted to rejoin the forum, but will be asked to submit the remainder of their commentary using the email address provided on the website, useofforcepolicy@urbanaillinois.us. This is a time for us, the city staff and leadership, to listen to you. We have one of our planning division staff members, Lily Wilcock, here to serve as our scribe. If you say something that I don't understand or that Lily doesn't understand, we will ask you for further clarification to make sure we are capturing your ideas accurately. We are scribing this so you can know what we hear you saying. We are also recording this session. As we go along, I may ask you follow-up questions as well, or I may ask you to send us follow-up by email. In order to make time for everyone, we're going to start with 5-minute rounds. If we get through everyone who would like to speak, then we will do another set of 5-minute rounds. Please use the raise your hand function if you would like to speak. And please note that the chat function will not be enabled. But if you would like to submit things in writing, you can do so using our dedicated email address. And again, that email is useofforcepolicy@urbanaillinois.us. The video function will be enabled if you would like to show your video while you speak, and we would love to be able to see your face to further and better connect with you. So as we get into this, we want to go ahead and open the panel up to the youth who may be here in attendance and who would like to share. And we do ask that don't be shy. Certainly this is the youth focus, and we understand that during the pandemic, which I think should have been stated and harped upon, we understand that COVID-19 is impacting how we do everything, from how we meet to how we interact to how we socialize. Having said that, we know that a great portion of our youth, high school students and maybe college students, may just be getting out of class, getting ready to tune in. So it is not my desire to monopolize today's conversation, filibustering myself, but certainly here in the next couple of minutes, if we do not have any youth in our panel, in our attendee section, with the permission of Mayor Marlin and Chief Bryant Serafin, at that point, we could open it up to other attendees, but we do want to first give first priority to the youth of Urbana and the surrounding community. Just one more thought. If you were not clear on how to raise your hand in the chat section, if you would press your participants button, you will see a lineup come up, and then you will see a raise your hand option, and that will allow Jason and the panelists to know that you would like to have something to share at this time. Thank you. As we are waiting for participants to join, if I may impart on you, Chief Serafin, as the leader of our police department here with the city of Urbana, where do you place the importance of the use of force as our police officers find themselves in varying situations engaging with our public and our citizens?
So, Lamont, it's, as I alluded to in some of my introductory remarks, use of force is absolutely one of the The power that the police have to use force is tremendous. That's why we have various trainings consistently on that. That's why if circumstances present and it's a deadly force encounter, I mean, there are no higher stakes than that. And when that's part of why when even the recruits even go to the academy, they start this sort of building this foundation immediately. Handgun training isn't a couple of hours. It is state mandated to 40 hours. And the last I knew, at least PTI did beyond that, and went to 48 hours of actual training. And the concepts of de-escalation sort of at the other end of this spectrum, those types of things are taught at PTI again with a classroom chunk. And then that, I believe it's 8 hours, that's woven throughout the curriculum. So as they use and engage in different scenario trainings and things throughout time, those things are sort of woven in and those concepts are reinforced. So it's, to I guess look at this from a training perspective, it's one that we do take seriously from the moment that the officers are hired.
And for clarity's sakes, PTI stands for?
Oh, absolutely. The Police Training Institute. So throughout the state of Illinois, there are numerous academies. Several in Chicagoland. The Illinois State Police actually runs sort of two academies, if you will, one aimed at state troopers, one aimed at municipal law enforcement. And that municipal curriculum is 14 weeks long. Just the 26 years ago when I started, it was only 10 weeks long. And when I was an intern, I worked alongside a gentleman whose PTI experience was only 6 weeks long. So as we continue to put more on the officers, as we continue to learn more, the training then continues to increase. But currently it's at 14 weeks. The Police Training Institute here, right on our own 4th Street in Champaign, Illinois here, is where we send our officers.
Okay, and thank you for that. And I think for all those who are in attendance, both attendees and panelists, I think it's important to note that, and you touched on a word there that's important, is trauma. And I think that when we're talking about the use of force, and certainly not to make one side more important or the other side less important, but anytime the use of force is enacted, it is a traumatizing event, not just for the person maybe who is having the force placed upon them, but certainly upon the officer who has to make use of various levels of use of force. I think that one thing our public should be clear on is that, our officers are trained at the highest level, and, we do not implore those men and women of the force who came here to have shootouts in the Wild Wild West. They care about our citizens. They care about their interactions. They care about the impact that we make. And I think that speaks to the point of why we're having this here, why we are having these conversations. We want our citizens of Urbana to understand that their commentary, their ideas are important and pertinent to us as we move forward in our community engagement and our relations with our citizens here. And as I look, I see our attendees numbers have grown, and certainly we are here to listen and to hear from you. Do we have any representatives from our youth population? I probably think that's 20 and under, 21 and under, who may be in attendance, who would like to raise their hand and just kind of speak on their feelings as far as how they feel about the use of force or the use of force policy as it stands now, or maybe what things they would like to see different, improvements or retractions. Hello, do I have someone trying to call in?
We do have someone who has called in on the phone as an attendee. If the person on the phone wants to speak to raise their hand, they can press *9. So if they press *9, it will raise their hand if they're calling in by phone.
Thank you so much for that update, Jason. Well, I certainly want to be mindful of everyone's time and participation. At this time, I would lean in towards our Mayor Marlin, and also Chief Seraphin. We do have a hand up there, Jason. Hello, are you there?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can. Would you mind sharing your name and whatever the community you represent with us today? Good afternoon.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Hogue, S-A-R-A, no H on the first name. And actually, Lamond, I think you and I were in a call with Julie Lau and some teenagers a few weeks ago. So I actually need to email you something. But
Please do, please do. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining with us.
yeah, you're welcome. I mostly came because I told some of the youth I work with about this. So I just wanted to be here as a support in case they wanted to talk. But it sounds like not many are volunteering to speak. So I just wanted to present a couple of things. First, I'll explain. I just do a lot of work with teens in the Urbana city, mostly with Urbana Middle School and Urbana High School. And so I just kind of looked over the policy of the use of force really briefly. And there's two things that kind of came to mind that I'm curious to learn more about. One of them is, are there different procedures or guidelines for specifically the school resource officer? Just considering the difference of age and strength compared to like a student, if there is any use of force needed. What are just kind of like the guidelines or procedures for that? Just considering that kids are a lot smaller than the adults that are in the school resource officer position. And then I'm just really curious about the use of deadly force. I think I just kind of, I look through the policy and I just wonder, like, to what extent does it really need to be deadly force? And if there are alternatives. Those are just the thoughts that I had. And I'm also happy to share the email with some of the other youth I work with if they are curious about emailing you all.
Okay. Hey, Sarah, thanks certainly for participating with us. And if I'm hearing you correctly, you know, the first thing that you had an interest in dealt with there were specific guidelines for the resource officers in our schools as using use of force, and then wanting to know more about the use of deadly force when that's enacted. Does that sound correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have anyone from representing our police department who would care to just kind of chime in and provide Sarah and our other listeners with some of this information?
Sure. I'll help, and I'll let maybe give Matt Bain a heads up while he prepares to handle the SRO guidelines question. But with regards to the use of deadly force, the law on this is one that I find interesting, and we try to distill it down. And one of the things I always say when people ask about deadly force is that when do you shoot your guns? And we'll get that in youth interactions and some of the younger kids. We will shoot, or depending on the circumstances, some other method, but we use deadly force to terminate life-threatening behavior. And I think that's at its simplest in form. The laws evolved over the last several decades, but we don't. I mean, at one point you could shoot at fleeing felons. No, we shoot to terminate life-threatening behavior, and that's when we do that. It's very, very rare, thank God. A lot of officers will go through their entire career and never fire their guns outside of the range time, and that's a good thing. Technology is interesting in how it evolves and helps us. When we have things like the taser, which I think is a fantastic tool when properly trained and when used appropriately, so that we don't have to perhaps resort to that. When we have life-threatening behavior, though, when we have to stop that behavior, that's when we have to use deadly force. Again, it's extremely rare. And Matt, if you're on the line, I don't know if you would like to try to address a little bit, maybe more with the SRO guidelines. Although I think they'll be pretty similar for both sets. But Matt, if you'd like to speak a little bit perhaps to that.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The guidelines are pretty much the same. We don't necessarily have different guidelines for different age groups of people, or necessarily different guidelines for the physical size of people. But when we're at the school, and I can speak on this because I was at the schools for more than 3 years. I remember one incident in that 3+ years having to use some type of force more than just a simple handcuffing or anything like that. And it was a student, unfortunately, having a mental health crisis. But we keep the difference in mind, that we are in the school setting, that we are around people that may not be trained in the same controlled tactics and things of that nature as a police officer is. So there's a lot more instance to involve school staff, and at least at the high school where I was primarily, they did a very good job of being able to talk kids into their office and calming situations, even in instances such as active fights in the hallway. They do a very good job of that. But the rules for the SROs are not different. They are just utilized different because of the constant setting they're in. I hope that kind of explains your question, Sarah. And if not, and I would also like to be included in that email that you were going to send out, and would be willing to speak further on that. Both of our school resource officers are on this session too, and I know that they would be happy to explain further if need be.
And Sarah, it's an interesting point, because it can be that's the one that we see when some SRO goes off the rails and there's some horrific event that happens with a 10-year-old. Well, whether that officer was dealing with that 10-year-old in the school or that small little 10-year-old on the street, I don't want them to do that on the street, just like I don't want that to happen in the classroom either. And so I think Matt's right that they're fairly it's a similar sort of balancing act. So thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still unmuted. Oh, I am still unmuted. So thank you.
No, thank you for chiming in, Sarah. We really appreciate it. And certainly, if we've had any new attendees who are affiliated with Sarah and the work that she does with the youth in Urbana, we would love to hear from you. I know that we have both of our SROs, Officer Robinson and Officer Chad Burnett here on the line, I think, with us. And I would like to give an opportunity for either one of them to maybe share their experience or approach to how they view use of force actually inside of the school, if they feel comfortable to do so.
I can go ahead and speak to that, Mr. Peppers, if you'd like. I don't know if I'm being heard right now. I'm doing this on my cell phone, so it's a little bit.
Hey, you're a pro. We can hear you and we can see you. Thanks a lot for attending and being with us on today.
Okay, no problem. I just would like to expand on what Lieutenant Bain explained. You know, the way it's handled in the high school anyway, staff typically tries to talk the kids down and handle most all situations. When we come into play is when staff is either fearful that something they may be harmed or that something may escalate to someone else being harmed. And in my short time being in the high school, I haven't had any experiences where I have not been able to talk a kid to the office or talk them out of the building if that's what staff requests or what. But typically it starts with staff, then they'll call us, and we just try to de-escalate the situation a little quicker because of the fear of a safety concern for whether someone else in the classroom or people around, or whether it's an active fight in the hallway. We just try to calm the situation, that's de-escalate it as quickly as possible. And what I've found, it usually staff is excellent about doing that. They get numbers of people there to control it. But there have been times where, you know, they've asked for assistance, just walk a student to the hallway. And during that walk, we just kind of talk. You know, the student's upset, obviously, and you have to let them vent for a little bit. But then at the same time, you have to reassure them that we're here to make sure that everybody's safe. And typically they understand that. And that's the first, and I would say that's the main thing we try to do up front. You know, I haven't had to put my hands on a student since I've been there, which is, you know, it's less than a year, but I mean, it's been pretty smooth as far as that goes. So I don't know if that answers your question about use of force or not, but typically we try to de-escalate using verbiage. And then, you know, if it resorts to you have to put your hands on somebody to persuade them into the office, you'll do that. But they usually, when we're involved or an officer gets involved, they move quicker than what they would normally, sometimes with staff.
And to piggyback on that, certainly for those who are in attendance or maybe who just joined us, hearing from one of our SROs, as a former student engagement advocate at the high school, I just want to give a quick personal testament. Officer Burnett and I have worked together on several occasions and have had great experience just being able to de-escalate and conversate with many of these students. And I know that there's a lot of debate, there's a lot of conversation about whether the SROs should be there or not, but I want to assure those of you who are listening, I know the same can be the same for Officer Robinson, I just don't work at the middle school, but I've had the pleasure of being with Officer Burnett, and he always puts not just the safety, but the dignity of these young people first in dealing with them. And he and I together on several occasions, we've had, I think, we both could agree, some great success with some of our students in the past. And there are students there now that look to him as a source of support. I've seen students who have asked for him, hey, can I talk with Officer Burnett? And that is the type of work I think that we as a city can be proud of. And certainly we thank you for your service, sir.
I appreciate that. I would like to also add, I think there's a misconception a little bit about our role in the school. Our role is not disciplinarians as far as school punishments. We don't hand out the detentions or suspensions or anything like that. We're mainly there for de-escalation and to be used as a resource for students who need help. And it can be a variety of different things, obviously, not just enforcement action. But thank you for allowing me to share.
Officer Robinson, if you're still on with us, do you have anything you'd like to share for just from the middle school perspective on this afternoon?
Mr. Peppers, I know she was having some difficulties with her video and or audio earlier, so I don't know if I think she can hear. She just texted me she could hear, but I don't know that she's able, I don't know if she got it fixed or not.
Well, certainly thumbs up and kudos to her and the job that she does over at the middle school. I've had the opportunity to speak with her both in person and via email, and they rave and review about her. I just didn't want to bypass an opportunity for her to share with those of us who are in attendance today. So as we move forward, and we are about 30 minutes into this session, do we have any other of our attendees who may represent the youth or working with the youth population who would like to raise their hand and just share any thoughts or feelings in regards to the use of force? I did mention this earlier, but if you're not familiar with how some of the options in Zoom work, if you would like to raise your hand, you simply go push your participants key, find your name, and there is a raise your hand option. I know that we do have an attendee who's calling in on the phone. If at any time you would like to join in and share, I believe the option was given was *9, and that's the raise your hand option on the phone. And certainly we have representatives from the police department here with us. We have our very own Chief Brian Serafin. We have our very own Mayor Marlin and other representatives of the municipality here at the city of Urbana. If you are just joining us or came late, my name once again is Lamont Peppers. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator for the city of Urbana and be facilitating the listening sessions on our review of force policy. Today's afternoon session focuses on the perspective of the youth in our community, but we understand that in this pandemic, schedules are very different now. So we know that many of our youth may just be getting out of classes or school. Some are just going into classes and school. And so we certainly want to allot time for people who are interested and willing to share, to chime in. This is why we're here. We're here to listen, we're here to learn, and we are here to try to make improvements when and where necessary. So do we have any other hands raised or participants who would like to speak at this time? At this time, Mayor Marlin or Chief Serafin, would either of you wish to open the discussion up to those members of the community who are not necessarily representing the youth, or would you like to hold off on that for a little while?
I think we should hear from as many people as we can in this time period. So sure, I'd say we can open up, and if we have youth joining us, then we can turn back to them.
Thank you so much, Mayor Marlin. So moving forward at this time, any of the attendees who are here and have something that they would like to share with us, whether you are the youth or not, if you want to go ahead and make use of your hand raising option, being mindful of the guidelines given at the beginning of this session, we would actually enjoy to hear from you and to learn from you. Lily Wilcox, once again, is scribing the conversation so that we make sure we hear you correctly and you make sure that you are being understood. So at this time, we have opened it up to the entire attendee. That also goes for any of our panelists. If we have any panelists who would like to chime in and share, certainly we would like to hear from any and all who are in attendance today. We take all matters of our community, especially the use of force policy and review, very seriously, and are hoping to engage as many diverse ideas, thoughts, feelings, initiatives that may come forth during these next sessions. Okay, well, moving forward, I don't know if we have addressed all the present concerns of the attendees here. I hope that we have allotted for enough space, created the type of atmosphere where all understand and feel welcomed. At this time, I think we could go ahead and move to have closing remarks, possibly by Chief Brian Seraphin and then Mayor Marlin, and then I would close us out. And certainly we thank everyone who took time out of their afternoon to be here with us.
So I guess I'll jump in here real fast now that the doorbell upstairs is rung and the dog is barking. I think it's a good time to turn the mic back on. I hope those who've listened at least gathered a little bit of information. We'll be back again later this afternoon, I guess an early evening session, and again tomorrow. So if anyone knows of anyone that has something, thoughts, feelings, and I get it, sometimes people don't want to speak up in an environment like this. That's why there's the email. I understand the seriousness of this topic, and again, if anybody has information, please go ahead and let us know. Or again, as happened with Sarah, maybe we can clarify a little bit more, or even engage in some ongoing dialogue beyond this. So thank you.
I would just say thanks again for Zooming in. We'll be repeating the session later this afternoon and again tomorrow. This is an ongoing process. We are revising the use of force policy, and we, again, with the goal of better responding to the needs of the community and better serving the community, and frankly, also making sure that our officers have the best tools, policies, and education that they need to do their job as well. So thank you for being here. Appreciate everything that you all have done to put these sessions together, and we'll see you later. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mayor Marlin. Thank you so much, Chief Seraphin. We also want to extend our thank yous to Lily Wilcox for scribing for us. We want to thank Jason Liggett and UPTV, the whole staff, for making this possible. As we close out, I would just like to share that for those of you in attendance, both panelists and attendees, if you have thoughts, feelings, or ideas that you didn't feel comfortable sharing at this time, or if they come to you later, please feel free to submit those ideas, thoughts to the Use of Force email address, which is useofforcepolicy@urbanaillinois.us. Certainly for members of our community, my name is Lamont Peppers. I am your Community Engagement Coordinator. If you would like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at slpeppers@urbanaillinois.us. At this time, we will go ahead and close the session out. We will be back again with you this evening, as well as tomorrow afternoon. And we just want to extend a big thank you to everyone in attendance. Thank you very much. Have a